You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
You know I'm Maureen Bogey.
And this is the Creep Street Podcast. Real quick up top, if you haven't already, please follow us on Twitter at Creep Street Pod. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast. Hey, honey, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, I want you to move on into that app, and I want you to hit us with a hot 5 stars. If you're listening to us on Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, honey, you just keep doing what you're doing, because that's what it's all about. It's all about feeling good, honey.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Maureen Bogey, what are we talking about on today's episode?
Okay, today we're getting naughty. We're getting randy. We're going to have lots of fun today, everyone. We are talking about the lovely topic of royal inbreeding.
Oh, boy. Yikes.
Kind of a bummer.
Kind of a bummer. Legitimately, kind of a bummer.
But we're going to have fun.
Absolutely. You know what? Here's the thing. I did not realize how prevalent this is. Prevalent this was through history. I thought it was like it had happened once or twice in a kind of a big way, and then it kind of was just this stereotype. This was a huge prevalent thing.
And up until very recently.
Yeah.
This is not like this was something that was done 1,000 years ago.
Right. I was totally surprised.
And our listeners in Europe, you might be like, okay, duh, bitch. Of course they were doing this, okay? But, you know, we're here stateside. We're not so used to all of the royal stuff.
Don't get me wrong. It's still here.
Yes, exactly.
It still has happened here. This is not to pass judgment, of course.
Oh, no. Just saying that maybe that's just an explanation why we're not as familiar with it. But there are lots of stories of families in the U.S. that have done lots and lots of inbreeding, for sure. So real quick, we're just going to talk about what inbreeding is, essentially, and kind of just really quick, a quick little genetics lesson up top.
The nuts and bolts of fucking your kin.
Yeah, especially the nuts, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we go. Inbreeding. It's basically really truly means the reproduction of closely related animals or humans or people, whatever, over the course of many, many generations. And something that I think people might be familiar with is purebred dogs, where they're like, German Shepherds are so cute and lovely, but they're known to like have lots of hip problems.
Right.
And that kind of comes from like, oh, it's because they were inbreeding the dogs so much because they didn't have options for other peeps, so then they got the issues.
Right.
And the idea behind it is, and really quick, incest, which I think most people know, is when closely related people engage in some sort of sexual activity, sexual intercourse, the big SI, as it were.
Sexual congress,
yeah. So a bummer. But those are kind of we'll go between those two words. But for the most part, it's kind of with these royal families, it's both. It's not just that there was incest between the current people of this time, but it's also like they come from many, many years of the inbreeding, getting nasty with it. A little lesson or primer, as it were, about why this is bad. Keep in mind, I have an acting degree. I'm not a scientist.
Let's be honest. Maureen and I tell dick jokes for a living.
Yeah.
We're not scientists. We're just reading you the facts we read.
Basically, the idea is you get 23 chromosome pairs when you are being, cooked up in your mom's womb. And so you get some from your mom, some from your dad, and they kind of like get in there and kind of code who you are. Your chromosomes figure that out. So the thing is, recessive genes is kind of the issue with inbreeding.
Is that like low-rise genes?
They are like low-rise genes. By the way, I will never wear low-rise jeans again for the rest of my life. I guarantee you that right now. What a terrible...
This episode will tell you why.
Yeah, exactly. Mainly because that was a very hard trend to come of age in, and I'm really grateful for the high rise gene trend. Anyway, so here's the thing. So recessive genes, they really pop out when both parents have that recessive gene. For example, something like having brown eyes or blue eyes, this has to do with dominant and recessive genes, but this is also very fine. I have blue eyes, Dylan has brown, we're just out here popping. So here's the thing. Like both of my parents have naturally brown hair, but I have red, blonde, strawberry blonde vibes in here. So basically the idea is that when you have two recessive genes, they'll go into it. Once again, with things like blue eyes or blonde hair or red hair, it's pretty innocuous. It's fine.
Right.
But let's say you have both of your parents both have a gene for hemophilia, which will come up later. That means that there's a higher chance of the children having hemophilia. Basically, it's great when you have a wide variety going off in your genetic makeup because there's a better chance of the stronger gene taking hold and getting you healthy, getting you good. Whereas if you're having kids with someone with the same or very similar genes, you're more than likely to pass off those genes that are harmful or bad.
Right.
So that's just a quick little overview about why you gotta switch up the gene pool.
Right.
You can't just be going off with your cousins and stuff. Speaking of cousins, when they get together, the rate of the child dying doubles. They're also much more likely to have physical and intellectual disabilities. And if the parents are brother and sister, it's even more intense and harmful. So now that we got that all out of the way, let's get started.
Coming up first, we are headed back to ancient times to a little country called Egypt.
Okay.
Talking about a little nasty son of a gun named King Tut.
Okay, ever heard of him?
Yeah. Ladies, restrain yourselves because this bad boy has got it bad.
Yeah, you hate to hear it.
Really bad.
It's a shame.
It's really bad. It's kind of sad. I actually, it's ironic because earlier I was preparing an episode on the curse of King Tut's tomb.
Yes.
And we decided, well, we're going to do that in a little while. So we put that on the back burner. And then when this came, it's just so funny how King Tut can't get away from it.
We just love the guy, I guess.
Just can't get away from that son of a bitch. All right, listen. King Tut, born 1342 BC. So, a couple of years before us.
Yeah, just a few.
His parents were siblings.
You hate to hear it.
And this had been happening for quite a while.
Yeah, the idea was pharaohs. The European idea a lot of the times with royalty is that they were like chosen by God or they are kind of like a spokesperson for God sometimes. With the pharaohs, they were like, no, the pharaohs are gods or are akin to gods. So they were like, we can't just be like out here like having sex and having babies with regular people. The pharaohs are gods. So they were like, we got to keep this bloodline pure. There weren't that many people in the family. So then the siblings and the cousins and, bummer.
Well, so Tut ruled from 1332 to 1323 BC. So not very long. It is pretty much known from, various archaeologists and whatnot. Well, he had a little something called Kohler's disease. And basically because of that disease, the bones in his feet died and collapsed. So he spent most of his life sitting. He had what was described by archaeologists as feminine thighs.
You love to hear it.
An overbite, 7 fused vertebrae in his neck, a bent spine, and an overbite. He died at the age of 19. He married, during that time, his half-sister. The two of them had 2 stillborn daughters.
Yeah, not really a shock. Very sad. And I think it's something that, since King Tut comes up so much, everyone thinks like, oh, he was a very prolific pharaoh. He reigned for a long time. He actually really didn't. It was just that like his tomb was found in good condition that like...
Exactly. It's funny. We think of Tut as kind of the big guy, the head honcho. Why he is so big is because how important his discovery was in 1922.
And like what that taught us all about ancient Egypt.
So naturally, he, is kind of, I guess if ancient Egypt had a star, he kind of became became the star. But he really was only a blip on the radar when
Right.
it comes to the actual time frame of ancient Egypt.
Yeah, it's very clear that the history of incest with him, and then also the incest directly before him with his parents, who were brother and sister, and then the fact that he married his half-sister did not bode well.
Right. And that was a very common practice, apparently. In ancient,
Yes.
sibling marriage was a very common thing in ancient times. So where are we headed to next?
Okay, we're sticking in Egypt, honey, and we're still having fun, but we're going forward in time, okay?
Let's take a little journey up the Nile forward through time.
Here we are. We're going to be with Cleopatra, honey, the one and only. That's not true. There are a few Cleopatras, but we're talking about the one that we're all vibing. So this is a quick little tangent because her story is very interesting, a little different than what we're going to be talking about with all these other royal. But so she ruled from around 51 BC to around 30 BC. Her parents were siblings. Yeesh. Okay, not ideal.
Yikes.
So this, even though this was like 1,000 years after King Tut, people were this was still kind of a thing with the royalty among Egypt,
Right.
as it was with everywhere. You know, this isn't just
Right,
Egypt.
right,
Everyone
obviously.
was doing gross shit. So here's the thing: her parents were siblings, and when she was, I believe, 18, 19-ish, she married her 12-year-old brother, and she was like, "Okay, this is great. Like, I'm married to my 12-year-old brother. I'm gonna like keep this power for myself. Like,
Right.
he's 12. I'm gonna like."
How old was she at the time?
She's about 18 or 19.
It was a forced robbery of the cradle.
Exactly, as it were.
Forced to rob that cradle.
So she was like, okay, cool, I can be like in charge. But then her brother turned 15 and he was like, honey, I'm older now and I have like homies with me to fuck this shit up. And then she was like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna seduce Julius Caesar. I'm gonna have his ass help me with this civil war. I'm gonna beat his ass.
Damn.
That's exactly what she did. So she like beat him in the civil war. She's like, great, okay. Then she married her 11-year-old brother.
Oh, she married up.
She married up. So the first one was 12 when they got married, but then he got older. She killed his ass. And then she married her 11-year-old brother. Still kind of like kept the throne. So we're not going to go into everything about Cleopatra right now, just kind of talking about her inbreeding. So she did have, I believe, 4 children. But the cool thing about Cleopatra is that it is widely believed that none of these 4 children were fathered by her husbands / brothers.
Right.
They were all fathered by either Julius Caesar or Mark Antony, which is very cool. So
Well,
she was like
yeah.
out here being like, I'm going to play the game.
Right. She was like, okay, I'll do this on paper because I gotta,
Yeah.
but I'm going to work within the system to fuck shit up.
Yes, many historians believe that she never had any sort of sexual relationship with her
Wow.
brother husbands.
Oh, kudos
Which
to
is
her.
cool. So very cool for Cleopatra. So Cleopatra was doing some good stuff, but overall a lot of brother, sister, cousins, but really a lot of brother, sister relationships in Egypt among the royals.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about a little fun in the sun? A little trip down Volcano Way.
Oh.
Where are we going?
We are going to Hawaii.
Hawaii.
We love this. Okay. We wanted to make sure we add this for many reasons. 1, it's a very cool story. 2, we're focusing a lot on Europe this episode. Not yet,
Exactly.
but we will. But we wanted to let you know Americans
Hey.
do this too. But this is just, we don't have royalty in America. But also really quick, I am sure I will say a lot of these names wrong. Mean no disrespect.
Of
I'm
course.
very sorry. Okay. So King Kamahaya. King Kamahaya, he ruled from around 1825 to 1854. So, he was the king of Hawaii, very great. He was in love with his sister, Nahai Ina Ina. Now, they were in love since they were kids. I don't know at what point they expressed this love to each other, but they both were in love with one another. And this was another thing common among the royalty in Hawaii, that they would marry each other, intermarriage. This wasn't something that was like taboo.
Right.
Especially for royalty. This was pretty standard. But Christian missionaries had been there at the time, and they had already converted Hawaii in general to be Christian. They were no longer their previous faith.
Wow.
So everyone was like, ooh, hold on.
Because this is obviously
Hawaii was not a state.
well before Hawaii was a state.
Exactly. This was the 1800s.
Oh, right.
So this was a good at least 100 years before. So everyone was like, hold on, we're Christian now. Like, this is bad. Like, the missionaries were like, no. And also the people were like, we're Christian now, so no. So they were like, okay, I guess we won't get married, even though the elders and the chiefs of the nation were like, no, this is like dope. Like, you guys should get married. So they didn't get married, but you know, they fucked.
Oh,
they
of course.
fucked. And Nahaina, she did get pregnant, and she was excommunicated from the church, and she was shunned by everyone. So she lived in isolation while she was pregnant, and the baby died hours after the birth because it had come from a long line of inbreeding, and the baby's parents were brother and sister. And so the baby died hours after the birth. Nahaina, she died 3 months later at the age of 20.
That's horrible.
Yeah, that's very sad.
I mean, that's like a good reason to move on to our next story, which takes place in Siam, Thailand.
Yes, it was Siam at the time, but now we refer to it as that sweet, sweet Thailand.
Yes, former Siam. We're going to talk about a little handsome devil named King Rama V.
Okay.
It's not good.
Yeah.
So,
Well, some of it is actually with this one.
some of it's nice. Oh, there's good things.
This one's very interesting.
King Rama V, he is credited with modernizing the nation and keeping it from being colonized by the British. He had 153 wives, consorts, and concubines.
Yeah,
And
he had a lot of
many-
people on the rotation.
Yeah, and many of them were cousins and sisters.
Yeah.
4 main wives were all half-sisters.
Yeah, so his main go-tos were straight up.
His steadies.
Yeah, his steadies were half-sisters. Not great.
His bays.
His bays.
The public record only shows that he actually had 1 wife, however, because he knew the Europeans would not like that.
Exactly. Which is ironic because the Europeans were like also doing this shit, but this was like later. It wasn't as obvious and as forthright. And I think it was more so like not just the incest and the inbreeding, it was also the polygamy that he was like, I know the Europeans aren't going to be in for this. So
Right.
let's just not let them know about it.
He had 77 kids.
Lots of others, though. He had a lot of other miscarriages and things like that, which was very,
right.
very sad. But 77 living,
Living-
not current. You know what I mean?
The 69th of which was Prince Mahido, and he had him with his half-sister.
Yeesh.
Now, Prince Mahido had a lot of physical problems because of the incest, but he was very smart. This is actually super, super cool.
It's great.
He went to Harvard Medical School, as well as lots of other highly ranked, respected institutions, and he revolutionized medicine and public health in Thailand. At the age of 37, he did die of kidney failure. But we wanted to highlight this because, you know, obviously as horrible as incest is, people who are the product of it did not ask for it.
Exact. It's not.
It's
their
not like
fault.
they did
Not their
something
fault.
wrong. They did not ask for it. And we wanted to show, like, this guy went on to do incredible things. And obviously, he died at a young age because of
Right.
problems relating to incest. But, I mean, the guy was able to do wonderful, wonderful things during his time here. And so that should be celebrated.
I think that's a really great thing. And also, King Rama V, he also did a lot of really amazing things for the country. And we didn't really do a ton of research on him before he was the ruler. I am sure. Well, actually, he was one of the children that was taught by The King and I. You know, if you know that musical.
Oh, that's right. There was something about he was somehow, is he like the inspiration for that?
He was, so The King and I was like the Siamese king had like a, I don't really remember all of it. It's been a long time since I saw the musical. Basically,
haven't seen that since, like,
this
grade
like British woman like taught them shit and whatever, and he was one of those kids.
Oh.
Which is just kind of cool.
That's
but
wild.
so he had been from a long line of inbreeding, I'm sure, all of that stuff.
Right,
so
right.
basically, what we're trying to say is, even if it doesn't mean you're bad,
Right.
it just means you got a hard lottery number.
You got dealt a hard hand, but God damn it, this guy played his hand well.
This family gave it its all, and we give them that. But a lot of the kids were very, very sickly and did die. But now
Well,
we're going to take it on to Juana the Mad.
Whoa!
Okay, we're out here. We're having fun. Okay, this is going to take us into some very, very interesting territory.
Oh my God, where are we jumping to?
Okay, we're hopping off to Spain, and we're going to love it there.
Oh, Spain. What year are we talking?
We're talking, it's starting about 1479. So here's the thing. Juana the Mad. Also, really quick disclaimer. A lot of this will kind of go back and forth between the Spanish names and the anglicized or Americanized names because, once again, not for any malice. It's just because we're dumbasses and we were taught many different names for people. Like, we know Christopher Columbus. That wasn't his goddamn name, but that's what we're taught in America. Right. So I'm very sorry about any sort of cuckoo-ness. But anyway, Juana the Mad, or Juana of Castile, as she is often known. She was born in 1479, and her parents were Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. Isabella and Ferdinand, they were second cousins. And they gave birth to Juana. Now, Juana's sister, fun fact, was Catherine of Aragon. She was the Spanish wife, the first wife of King Henry VIII.
Son of a bitch.
So she was the one that gave birth to Mary Tudor. She was the one that was like having trouble having male heirs. So that's why King Henry VIII divorced her and started the Church of England, the whole vibe.
Wow.
So just this just shows you how connected all of the families of Europe were at this time, really, and for generations. It's so wild that the people that were running all of these nations were like inbred and had a lot of issues mentally, emotionally, physically, everything. But going back, okay, so Juana the Mad, her parents were second cousins, yeesh, and this went along for a lots of times. But she married Philip I of House Habsburg.
They are the Rockefellers of fucking your cousins.
Exactly. So she married Philip I of House Habsburg, and she was like, oh my god, I love this guy, like, he's dope. He was like, not so sure, I'm gonna like sleep around. She was so pissed. One time she caught him in the act of adultery, and she stabbed the woman in the face.
God damn.
Yikes. So once again, you know, I understand being upset, being jealous, that seems extreme. But so at the age of 28, Juana's husband, Philip I, unexpectedly died. Juana was very upset because she loved him, and she refused to have him buried for a long time and actually slept next to his corpse for a while. I don't know exactly how long, but it wasn't just like one night. Yeah.
The corpse. I remember when Prince Albert died, I had read that Queen Victoria apparently every morning would lay out his clothes on the bed.
Aww,
and that to me,
nice.
I remember when I first heard that, it was something that it just touched me so much. I thought, oh wow, here's this
beautiful.
queen every morning she lays out. It was just such a sweet thing. And it's funny because at first I was going to go, oh.
But it's hard though, because these people though, it's so easy. In this situation, it's clearly just like, there's no excuse. That's insane. But it's hard because it's so easy.
And we'll get to Queen Victoria.
Oh no, she's in the...
She's not even safe.
She's in the outline,
no one's
honey.
safe.
But we love them all. We really do. I love Queen Victoria. Anyway, it's so interesting though, because it's so easy to write off these relationships being like, oh my god, they were cousins, like that's gross, like no. But sometimes they really did like have a lot of love for each other, because and I think a lot of it is just because they had grown up with thinking marrying your cousin or your second cousin or whatever is so normal that they didn't even think anything of it. It's still terrible. I'm not saying it's like, right, it's fine, marry your cousin, but it's just adds a level of humanity to it. These people weren't, what's the word I'm looking for?
Right. At the time, it was not the faux pas it was now.
Right. And it was for commoners, but just the royalty really put themselves in a completely different standard.
But it didn't have the moral repugnance that it does now, I guess you would say.
And even at the time, there was some hesitation about these things in general, because they didn't have the specifics on genetics at the time, but they did notice they're like, okay, like these kids are not doing so well. So according to the Vatican, a lot of times they were not supposed to marry, but there was a lot of papal dispensations giving permission. They were given permission because they were royal, and they genuinely were like, the bloodlines must be pure. Really, they didn't know that they were poisoning themselves.
Right.
But that was their thoughts. So going back, Juana was like, okay, my husband died at 28. I'm upset. I'm going to sleep next to his bed for a long time. Not great. In the future, she actually was considered to be so mad that she was forced to live in a convent/asylum type place. And I haven't done enough research to really speak. Some people think that maybe she wasn't mad and it was just her father and the men in the royal community that were kind of deeming her as mad to take away power from her. And some people say, no, she actually was mad. My guess is it's probably a little bit of the both.
Right.
You know, I'm sure there was some politics involved, and I'm sure she was from a long line of inbreeding. But her son with Philip I was Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. And he was a Habsburg, obviously, because Prince Philip was the Habsburg.
Long line of the Habsburg.
And he was known for having the very pronounced Habsburg jaw or Habsburg lip. This was a thing that was very prevalent among the Habsburgs, where because of the years and years and years of inbreeding, their lower jaw protruded further than their top jaw. More so than just an underbite, it was pretty intense.
It's not a good sign when you are the namesake for a certain ailment.
It's a bummer.
It's not like having a highway named after you.
So he had this, and he also had epilepsy. So not great, but for all intents and purposes for a Habsburg, this actually wasn't that bad. However, Charles V's his son was King Philip II of Spain, and he had 4 wives total. All of his 4 wives were related to him. The first wife that was related to him was his double cousin. Let me explain. Basically, this means that all 4 of their grandparents were shared. Basically, he wasn't siblings with his wife,
right,
but his parents and her parents were both brother and sister.
They would be like auntie cousins,
I guess. It's like cousin plus. I said double cousins. That's just my version. I don't know if there is a word for it, but that's what I have decreed. So the first one was this double cousin, and she died at the age of 17 after giving birth to their son Carlos. He was known to be very, very violent, mentally unstable, and had a litany of health issues. So his father, Philip II, Juana's grandchild, had to imprison his son Carlos because he was so mad and violent, and he died in imprisonment at the age of 23.
Man, that's horrible.
It's just like so sad.
You know, it just makes me want to take it on over to 17th century Spain.
Okay, we're having fun.
We're going to talk about King Charles II.
There he is.
AKA the Bewitched.
Yeah, this guy was he was known for just being the epitome of inbreeding and how that's bad.
Let's lay the ground floor here for old King Chuck II. Born 1661. What a year.
I mean, a gorgeous year.
His parents were uncle and niece.
Yikes.
All 4 of his grandparents were descendants of Juana the Mad.
So clearly, once again, just to reiterate, a long line of inbreeding, not just his parents, but it had been going on for years and years and years.
I've noticed that it seems like there's so many figures throughout history whose names are something something the Mad.
The Mad, yeah.
Like, was there ever like a something something the Rad? Yeah, was there ever like some old king who's just king of the rad?
Who just like did kick flips and like...
If I was under the reign of a king rad or a queen rad...
Oh my God, I'd love it. Well, here's the thing. King Philip, who was the one that was married to Juana, he was known as Philip the Handsome.
That's how I'm credited in all of our shows.
That's true.
Well, so as we said, all 4 grandparents, descendants of Juana the Mad. He could not talk. This is sad. This is a bummer.
This guy, we got to talk about him because he's like, for lack of a better word, fucked up. But we do feel bad for this guy because it is not his fault.
King Charles II of Spain could not talk until he was 4, and also could not walk until he was 8. His jaw was so huge, and his tongue was so huge. He had incredible problems eating. He could barely speak. He would drool a lot, all that stuff. He could barely read or write. He died at the age of 38, 39, roughly around that area. And actually, that on its own was considered to be incredible.
Like miraculous.
In fact, apparently he was on death's door numerous times.
From day one, basically.
From day one. It really kind of breaks my heart. Because as we said, it's like this person, he did not ask for that. Granted, like I said, he's royalty. So it's not like he was a peasant. He probably was taken very well care of for the time.
But still.
But it's like this guy did not ask for it. And I don't want to just be a total pity party. I'm sure if you were able to ask him, he would say, hey, there was things about my life that I loved.
Sure.
I'm not trying to say it was just all rain on his parade, but it's just the whole fucked up idea of it. But anyway, died at 38, maybe 39. He was short, couldn't walk, obviously, epileptic, and senile and bald. Doctors said he was senile and bald before the age of 35. So like most Chicago comedians, but...
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
without the incest. Just from in Chicago, for King Chuck, it was the incest. For Chicago comedians, it was just a good decade of booze and coke.
Exactly. Yeah, that'll do you.
That'll
in.
make you bald and bitter. Just a
senile.
decade of sweet cocaine and booze. Oh, I love that coke. This is also what the autopsy said. In my heart of hearts, I think this is an exaggeration.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is.
And just a little. I mean, I don't know if we had to, but just in case, here's a little pre-warning. This description of his autopsy is a little unsettling,
But probably an exaggeration.
my guess is not that he wasn't seriously ill, but my guess is to prove to stress a point. The person doing the autopsy made some bold statements to essentially get the point across.
Yeah.
He said there was no blood in his. He said the person who performed the autopsy said that within the body of King Chuck II of Spain, there was no blood. His heart was the size of a peppercorn. His intestines were gangrenous and rotten. His head was full of water, and he only had one testicle that was black as coal.
Yikes.
I'm sure that's right. I'm sure there was a lot of water on the brain. I'm sure there. I feel like he's probably exaggerating to prove a point, but still, the description that's given, it's like this poor
He didn't stand a chance.
The fact that he lived to the age he did is wild.
Insane.
And he lived in probably a perpetual state of fucking hell.
Yeah.
For the almost 4 decades.
Yeah.
And did not ask for that.
And it wasn't just the physical ailments. He also was purported to have a lot of emotional intelligence ailments or deformities, I guess, if that's the right word.
Right.
I guess, I don't know if they did this necessarily, but he asked to have all, or at least some of his ancestors dug up so that he could enjoy a meal with them.
That almost makes me want to cry.
I know. He just wanted to be around people that, like, he was actually married as well. And he was impotent, though.
That's like it's macabre. It's obviously grotesque, but at the same time, it's like that's
It's not his fault.
I know nothing about this royal family. I don't know if history considers them good or bad or whatnot. I'm just, from an outsider's perspective, my heart really went out to old King Chuck, because this was probably the worst case. In terms of physical ailments.
Yes.
It just bummed me out. But
anyway. It was
anyway.
actually because of all of his ailments and that he was impotent. He couldn't have children. That started a whole war in Spain because there was no heir.
And here's this guy in the middle of it who didn't. That just breaks my heart. Yeah. Anyway, his sister was Margaret Teresa. She, however, thankfully, was mostly healthy. Was
exactly,
but was forced to marry her cousin/uncle.
He was both.
Leopold I. Here's the fucking kicker. Who insisted that she call him uncle? What the fuck is that?
They're married. It's like, you gotta, like, let's just forget the uncle part, honey. Like,
it's it's already bad enough that we're forced to do this, but to be like, no, call me uncle.
It's a stone cold bummer.
That's like a fucking bummer. It just bums me out.
But who knows? Maybe she was just like, okay.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is, who knows? Maybe she was like, sure.
Well, all of them were so accustomed to marrying their family members that maybe that was just like fine.
Yeah, who knows?
And maybe, and for whatever reason, that just like was passed on. But maybe lots of people did that. Who fucking knows?
Yeah, who knows? With her uncle/cousin Leopold, she had 2 miscarriages. She had 4 kids, but only 1 survived infancy. And she died while pregnant at the age of 21. And she was blamed. Oh, God. At first, I felt bad.
Yeah, this one shows you, like,
At first, I felt bad.
She actually just sucks.
First of all, she's already had 2 miscarriages and 4 kids that lived, well, 1 that lived past infancy.
Right.
By the tender age of 21.
Oof.
She blamed the death of her kids on the Jewish people.
And she convinced her husband to expel the Jews from Vienna. As well as a number of other just heinous crimes against Jewish people.
And see, this is why I'm hesitant to say, oh, I feel for this person.
It's so hard.
It's so hard to say, oh, I feel bad for that person, when they turn around and immediately just blame it on it's like, go fuck yourself.
It's like, no, your kids all died because your family has been inbreeding for years and years and years and years. But let's take it on over.
Oh, where are we going to? We are going to Paris. Let's talk about the one, the only, Kirsten Dunst, a.k.a. Marie Antoinette.
Exactly. So we won't go a ton into her shit because it's not quite relevant for what we're talking about, but she was a member of the Habsburg family.
Oh.
So she was from a long line of inbreeding all this shit. Okay. Yikes. But she did have the Habsburg jaw. But the thing is, hers was just very, very minor. So hers just kind of looked like she was pouting all the time. It kind of made her just look hot.
It was just enough that it gave her like a look.
Little sexy pout. And so Marie Antoinette is probably the most famous Habsburg family member.
Right.
And she was a product of incest. She was a product of all these things. She just kind of lucked out.
Right.
Similar to Margaret Teresa or Margaret
Teresa. Ah.
Maybe we'll do a Marie Antoinette episode one day. Who knows? Who knows? But
I'm sure there's a conspiracy.
Yeah, we'll get in there
somewhere.
later. So she was the most well-known of the Habsburgs. Just wanted to mention her at least.
Right.
But now we're going to pop over to that young, fierce, thriving Hanover fam. And you know who that includes? King George III. Woo! Okay, we're in England. We're having fun. Okay. He is known as the Mad King George many times. Yeesh. This is the same King George that was like ruling during the American Revolution and was like, fuck these people. Like, they don't know what they're missing. Like, they're gonna no, they're stupid. But then Americans were like, no, honey. But so he was a part of the Hanover family and they were known for a lot of cousin to cousin situation.
Okay.
So this started off right away. He actually was not expected to survive long because he was actually born 2 months premature, which at the time, I mean, it's a big deal now. Can you imagine, like, you know, in the 1700s, like that was a huge deal to be 2 months premature and for him to survive.
That's so wild.
It is very, very interesting. And
wow.
So it's not proven that he was born 2 months premature because of the long line of inbreeding, but it seems relevant at the very least. He also had something, I believe I'm saying this right, called polyphyra, which made him very, very achy all the time.
Okay.
And caused his pee to turn blue. A bummer. And that's just kind of weird.
That's also something in a lot, believe me, for this episode, we've had to do a lot of reading about incest.
A lot of weird shit.
The blue pee thing comes up a few times.
So King George, he also, in, I believe it was 1801, he was taken to the hospital in a straitjacket. And he was crazy. And that was kind of the last time anyone really saw him. And he died in this facility, not knowing who he was, all that sort of stuff. Like he did not do well. And so that's something about King George III. Now, his granddaughter, which is insane. I guess it makes sense. I just can't believe its only granddaughter was Queen Victoria.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very cool. Queen Victoria, who we all know and love. She's so iconic. She was like, yes, white wedding dresses. Like, she was married to Prince Albert.
Right.
Who was her cousin. And they had 9 kids together.
Right.
And their youngest son was named Leopold, and he died at the age of 30 from, which I mentioned earlier, hemophilia. Hemophilia did become known as the royal disease.
Right.
But sometimes people place blame on Queen Victoria for this, but it's not her fucking fault. She does no control over the fact that hemophilia, this comes from years and years and years of inbreeding. Their youngest son, Leopold, died of hemophilia, as well as many other descendants of Queen Victoria. Her grandson was named Friedrich, and he died at the age of 2 from hemophilia.
That's too bad.
Very sad. But maybe one of the most notable or famous descendants of Queen Victoria with hemophilia is her great-grandson, Alexei, who was the Prince of Russia. He was one of the Romanov children. And he
famously had hemophilia.
He had hemophilia very intense, which we were going to do a whole episode on Rasputin.
Oh, it's coming, ladies and gentlemen.
This is kind of how Rasputin got his power among the Romanovs
family.
because
but that is for a series in the future. But let me tell you, we're going to get to Rasputin Rasputin, because how that son of a
Crazy.
bitch was able to wiggle his way into the Romanov family in such an insidious and ingenious manner. This guy, it'll probably be a 2-part episode, honestly.
Yeah, Queen Victoria's granddaughter was Alexandra, and she was the mother of Alexei, who had hemophilia, and so she was the one that was so obsessed with trying to make him better. Obviously, it's her son, so she's trying to make him better, so she's desperate. Rasputin comes along, everything falls to shit. We'll get into that later. So, in 1920, King George V, he comes forward and he's like, hey, the people in the royal family no longer have to marry other royals. Like, let's be honest here, this is getting insane. It's the 1900s.
Right.
But old habits die hard. Queen Elizabeth II, the current Queen of England, she is married to Prince Philip, and they are both second and third cousins. The third cousin situation.
So they're 2/3 cousin.
They're 2/3 cousin. They are both direct descendants from Queen Victoria. So yeah, it's kind of interesting where you're kind of like, oh, that's fucking bizarre. But then at the same time, you're like, well, I guess they've been together for a long time. That's nice. And also they were kind of on the cusp of a weird change of time.
Fuck yeah, I'm going to marry my cousin.
Right. Well, also
what the fuck else would I do? Marry someone I'm not related to like a fucking animal?
Right, exactly. Well, especially for Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, they were like, we're second and third cousins. We're like not even related compared to all of this other bullshit.
Right.
And here's the thing for my Creep Street citizens out there. Just don't fuck your cousin at all.
Don't fuck your cousin.
But you know what? If you're going to fuck your cousin, fuck your second or third cousin, okay? Don't do the first cousins. Really, I'm saying this as a joke, and I hope that's coming across. Don't fuck anyone you're related to, but it could be worse than your second or third cousin. I'll say that.
In fact, why don't we make May official Don't Fuck Your Cousin month?
I think that's a great idea.
Let's do it.
I mentioned Ancestry.com earlier. Since we're in quarantine and have nothing to do, I have been perusing that, trying to figure out my family tree. Haven't found too much stuff that I didn't already know, things like that. And I haven't found a direct link between Dylan's family and my family, but I just know somewhere in there we've got to have a shared ancestor.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So that wraps it up for All in the Family, a.k.a. Royal Inbreeding.
I know this never, ever made you feel uncomfortable.
Oh, we should have saved this for Valentine's Day next year.
We'll just air it again.
Well, maybe we'll do a Royal Incest too. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as always, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
And this is Creep Street. Citizens of the Milky Way, good night and goodbye.
Goodbye.